Enrichment, Enlightenment, Transformation. Rabbi Yisroel Cutler, the spiritual leader of Chabad of Cary, North Carolina, guides anyone who has been searching for a meaningful life and conscious living. Join our discussions about the mundane, our daily activities, and then infuse every day with a spiritual twist from the inspired sages of the Talmud and Jewish mysticism, which many call Kabbalah. We learn from the root source of all religious monotheistic traditions and delve into the symbolism and levels of meaning from biblical stories.
Good morning. Amnon, are we connected or is the connection?
We are connected, but it is messing up. It's freezing. Keep going.
Okay. Well, it's good to see everyone. It's good to be back after about a 4-week break. Does everyone have a book? Does everyone have a book? Let's pass out the books. Today, November 1st, and we started the Torah once again. So last week we did the Genesis, Bereshis. We did not have a class last week. Today we are up to the second portion of the Torah, Noach. So we're going to study Noach and one particular part of the story that usually doesn't get mentioned. And we're going to zero in on that. And I think it has a lot of relevance today. And I'm going to spend a lot of time discussing how I feel it's relevant to life today. But let's take a step back. The world is created. It's God's world when it's created. And it was clear to everyone that this isn't just a random place, and this is Hashem's world. This is God's world. And it's so sad to think that in a matter of just 10 generations, that's all, 10 generations, this place turns from God's garden to complete chaos, cruelty, immorality, theft. Complete lawlessness. So much so that, again, with our belief that Hashem is a kind God, and although there are many things we don't understand, we still have that belief that God is a loving God. So to speak, the only solution was, as we do on our laptop when the laptop gets kind of old, we have to do a hard reset. More than a reboot. A reboot would just be, hard reset is getting rid of all the files. So to speak, the world at this point in time needs a hard reset. And in Kabbalah, it explains that just like in Judaism, what is used to purify a person, a mikvah, which is water, water is always the mechanism of transformation in Judaism. So too, we have the entire world submerged in a 40-day mikvah. A 40-day mikvah. It's interesting that in Jewish law, the minimum requirement for a mikvah is that it has 40 se'ah of water. Se'ah is a biblical measurement. So think of the flood as a major mikvah that is necessary in order to restore the world. But I find it so troubling, so sad, that in just 10 generations, we went there. This isn't what the class is about. We can talk about some of the factors that might have led to it. First of all, they didn't yet have a Torah. God didn't give the world and give a Torah right away. So there wasn't a moral guide. There was oral traditions that were passed down how to live, but there was no formal Torah that was given. Do you mind getting a chair? I think we need. Oh, we have one over there?
One more now.
And number two, I think this is important to note. We know that everyone worshipped idols in those days. How did idolatry begin? Anyone remember? Maimonides tells us how idolatry began. Very interesting. Maimonides tells us that the first generation still had a direct relationship with God, right? Adam and Chava, right? God spoke to them, kind of. Even the next generation had a little bit of that. And then that stopped. There's no direct prophecy anymore, no Torah. So what happened, the third generation said, you know what? I remember our grandpa and grandma used to like have that connection with God. It looks like the connection has gotten weaker and weaker. God must have lost interest in us. And it must be that instead of God having a direct relationship with us, God must have appointed representatives, senators, congressmen, the God of the rain and the God of this and the God of this, and each power were seen as an independent force. And Maimonides writes that at the beginning they still recognized that over all of these independent forces was Hashem. The mistake was looking at these as independent forces as opposed to no more than a tool of God, right? Eventually, the idol worship got so bad they forgot that there's even a God at all. Yeah, right.
So I find myself wondering if God went to a lot of trouble to set up the world,
Correct.
and I would have thought he would pay attention to the early world and notice, it's really deviating from what I wanted, and kind of nudge it back, as
Yeah.
opposed to show up late and hit it with a hammer.
Yeah.
Or in the same thing, animals that can't do evil,
Correct.
he destroyed them too.
So that is a separate question. What did the animals do wrong? Let's hold that question for a moment. Yeah, Brian, it's a good question. It's a good question, and I guess that is what creation is. Creation is a risk. God took a big risk in creating the world.
Wait.
And I guess, Brian, my question would be, why wouldn't God have given us a little more guidance early on and waited until 1948? By the way, do you know 1948 on the Jewish calendar was when Abraham was born? Did you know that on the Jewish calendar? Not the modern.
Right.
Why wait till 2,448 before showing up at the giving of the Torah?
I mean, one answer is, okay, I set this experiment in motion. Let's see how it'll do.
Right.
There's also the component of free will.
Well, that's what Brian is
Well,
suggesting.
yeah, I mean, I get free will, but God can still intervene,
Right.
and provide some guidance.
But
He
God
did intervene. He flooded the whole world. That was pretty.
But why?
practical.
So Brian is saying, why wait so late before intervening in that manner and not send some prophets down or whatnot beforehand to try to? It's a good question.
Yeah,
But yes.
Rashi says that Noah 400 years
Correct.
he built the
So,
ark,
but that still is very late in the going. What Steffi pointed out is if God wanted to destroy the world, there's far easier ways of doing it than this whole flood. Especially because, and as a believer, I will tell you that there are many parts of the flood story that don't make sense. I'll be the first to say it. Rationally, it doesn't add up how all the animals could fit. And you have to say that, guess what? It is called a miracle. Well, once you say it's a miracle, why bother with the whole
reality check.
correct? You could, and the answer to that, Steffi, is, as you pointed out, God wanted a drawn-out process in order to allow people to do teshuvah. God had wanted Noach to be building this in order that people should ask him, Noach, what's with the construction project? And Noach should answer. And in the process, he should influence people, which unfortunately he wasn't able to influence one single person outside of his family for another conversation.
He didn't try very hard with it. Isn't that one of the criticisms of
Correct. That is one of the criticisms of Noach and why Noach is not seen to be.
Oh, that he didn't try very hard to convince people. So that getting to the darker side of in his age.
Correct.
Maybe he just didn't have the capacity.
Yeah, I like that. Meaning everyone has different skill sets. He was
He was a builder.
a builder and he was able to withstand pressure, which is very good,
And deal with a little bit of animal hubs.
right? But he was not a zoologist also, but he was not charismatic. He was not outgoing, perhaps. He didn't have what Abraham had. And again, that is why in Jewish tradition, Noach is not seen as the first Jew. That waited till Abraham. Okay, but let's return. So it's very sad. 10 generations, the world is completely evil, completely, to the extent of, with the exception of Noach and his family, lawlessness, raping, robbery, just complete breakdown of all law and order. Yeah.
Is there a point where it started to turn, or one person or a group of people that started the whole bad turn down?
Yeah, the Bible is very terse. It tells us so little about what happened. It did say that about 2 generations after Adam, idolatry began. as I just explained. And what's important about idolatry is that once you have many gods, guess what else you have? No one order, no one set of laws that everyone has to abide by. Why is the Torah so anti-idol worship? All right, no. So I have a little, little guy in my backyard, little idol. What's the end of the world? Am I hurting someone? So there are many answers to that question, but one of the easiest is that in these ancient times, many gods was an excuse to do whatever you wanted. Because my God told me I can do this. Your God told me, as opposed to the notion of one God that no one is beyond the law. So we know when idolatry began. We don't know when it completely got out of control. So Hashem says he's going to bring the flood, saving no one except for Noah, his wife, his sons, and his sons' wives, and they're in the ark. And of course, there's the flood. And the story that we're going to focus on today is what happens when the rain stops. The rain stops, but the world is still very wet. Noah wants to see whether or not it's safe to go outside. So let's begin text 1, page 14. Andy, you want to read?
Sure. And it came to pass at the end of 40 days that Noah opened the window of the ark that he had made. And he sent forth the raven, and it went out back and forth until the waters dried up off the earth. And he sent forth a dove from with him to see whether the waters had abated from upon the surface of the earth.
Keep on going.
But the dove found no resting place for the sole of its foot. So it returned to him to the ark, because there was water upon the entire surface of the earth. So he stretched forth his hand and took it, and brought it back to him to the ark. And he waited again another 7 days, and he again sent forth the dove from the ark. And the dove returned to him at eventide, and behold, it had plucked an olive leaf in its mouth. So Noah knew that the water had abated from upon the earth. And he again waited another 7 days, and he sent forth the dove, and it no longer continued to return to him. And it came to pass in the 601st year, in the first month, on the first of the month, that the waters dried up from upon the earth. And Noah removed the covering of the ark, and he saw, and behold, the surface of the ground had dried up. And in the second month, on the 27th day of the month, the earth was dry.
This is the part of the story we usually don't discuss. I have a lot of questions on this story. What are yours? So the years is another thing about the years and people living a long time. So that's another discussion. But let's talk about the actual story of what he did here.
Why wait all these days? I mean, if it was a miracle to begin with, why didn't it just happen just like?
Well,
The whole story here is a mix of miraculous and natural.
I said
Hashem did a miracle, but required Noah to do human effort. Noah had to build it. Noah had to bring in the animals. He had to feed them. So the same thing is true with the water drying, Pam. There was a process, and you have to wait till that process was over. So Noah is ascertaining. He's trying to determine whether or not he's able to go out. So there's a few questions. Number one is, even after the water was dry, did he leave? No. A few verses later, God tells him, it's time to leave, and he leaves. So if he anyways was not going to leave until he got the green light from God, why go through all this with the birds? Okay, that's question A. But then, as far as this story goes, I have a few questions. What are they?
Why a raven and then the dove? What's the point of the raven?
Okay. So why 2 birds? Why 2 birds? Why not 1 bird? Why 2 birds?
And 2 separately.
Why these 2 birds? There's many birds that you could have chosen to go on this task.
One is the bird of prey.
Why this order? First the raven and then the dove. 3 questions. Why 2, not 1? Why these? Why this order? And especially why 2 birds? Because it seems to me as if did the raven do the mission or it did not?
No, it just left. And it went out, back and forth. I don't know if you're back and forth.
It was circling. It says it kept on circling So why wasn't that alone an answer? It didn't go anywhere, so apparently it wasn't dry. I don't know. It was just circling around. And if it was a lousy, if it wasn't doing a good job, why did he send the raven at the beginning?
No, the raven was supposed to hunt. It's a bird of prey. So if there's nothing to prey on, it's going to be circling around and not going anywhere.
But there's no animals, they're all in the ark.
But
But maybe the raven doesn't know that. So I'm trying to find something to eat.
This is something that puzzled all the commentators. So haven't found very good explanations with pshat, with the literal over here. And we're going to have to go to more mystical. But according to pshat, did the raven do its job? By it circling over and over and not finding any animals to prey on, was that alone not a sign to Noah that the world's not dry? I don't know. I'm throwing this out. I don't know.
He was a scout, and he was saying it's not safe to go out.
So then why did he bother sending the dove afterwards? He had his answer from the raven.
Well, the dove eats birds.
Anyone else? Anyone else?
I'm not so sure, but is a dove like a pigeon?
Yes, in Hebrew, Yonah can be pigeon or dove.
Right, and a pigeon is known to come back home.
So why not begin the mission with a pigeon?
Because the pigeon's going to come back home. You wanted something to stay out there. If it was good enough, maybe.
So it's an odd story. It's an odd story. It's yes.
A dove is a symbol for peace, and a raven with death could be, and could be darkness. So is there any darkness left in the world?
So we're going to go along those lines. Good. I like that. This question is one many of the commentators, the Nasiv, who lived in the 1800s. Do you want to read text 2, please?
Think about it. Why did Noah choose? There are no birds that fly better than them. Furthermore, how did Noah have permission to let these two birds out of the ark before the time came for everyone else to leave?
So the Nasiv actually answers that it's quite possible that these birds, especially the dove and pigeons, and we know pigeons have been used for a very, very long time for missions and mail, and so he actually answers in text 4. Let's skip to text 4, please. Why don't you do 4 as well? I would suggest.
I would suggest that this raven and dove were not among the pairs brought into the ark upon God's command for the purpose of breeding offspring. Rather, before the flood, Noah was a nobleman, and the custom then was for noblemen to raise ravens and doves. These birds entered the ark as part of Noah's household. Homegrown ravens are not sent far, but doves are used to traveling long distances to carry letters and bring back various objects in its mouth. Thus, when Noah sent the raven and it saw only water, it stayed put rather than travel far. So he sent the dove, who was used to flying on faraway missions.
So he suggests that these were not some of the animals in the ark, he had his pets. This is his own pets. And he sent the dove because that's something the dove is for, which furthers our question then, why send the raven? One more thing I noticed, and this was text 2, but if you go back to the verse at the beginning, text 1, if you go back to the verses at the beginning, it says he sent forth the raven. Does it say why he sent the raven? And it went back and forth. And then it continues, he sent forth the dove.
Well, no.
Was he in the
Correct.
ocean?
Yes, right.
At sea level, you cannot see very far. Whereas we have elevation, you can see a long way. So that's a real problem for mariners. That's why they have a crow's nest
That's why you just
100
see
feet
the
up in the
sea.
air and top of the mast, because they can see so much farther.
Good. So Noah wants to see other areas. And again, when the dove came back with the olive leaf, it implied that there's some vegetation. Some commentators even say that it might be new vegetation that had happened since the flood. If this flood destroyed everyone, you'd think it would have destroyed the leaves perhaps as well.
Well, maybe God's making the place ready.
God's making the place ready, so that was one positive sign.
That makes sense to me.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's getting ready again. It's almost like creation's
Yeah, I
happening
mean, no
again.
one doesn't have to see all the miracles to know that things are being set up.
Mhm.
In my
Well, and it's like the swamps. Trees do continue to grow even though they submerged in water.
So I don't have, as I said today at the beginning, according to Pshat, Pshat means a simple reading of the story. I don't have a good answer for why the raven. The verse doesn't say why he sent the raven. It makes sense why pigeons were used for this mission. I don't have a good answer for the raven, and I'm waiting for someone to give it to me. Pshat. All I can do is jump straight to the deeper components of the Torah, symbolic, Chassidus, Kabbalah, what Noah is getting at. But according to Pshat, it just seems to be that the dove would have been the obvious choice, and that is what the verse actually says itself. So in Torah literature, Torah actually says something very similar to Edgar Allan Poe. So when you hear the word raven in our mind, unless you're a football fan in Baltimore, you usually do not have positive images come to mind.
Nevermore.
You think of, there's a famous poem, you think of black, you think of
Ominous.
ominous, yeah,
Death.
death, nevermore. I don't know the rest of the poem, I just know those words. What was the rest of the poem about? What was the whole poem about, other than quote the raven nevermore?
Also, raven nevermore.
In any event, but in Torah literature, this similar idea is mentioned, to quote the raven nevermore, or those that have traveled to England know the legend about the ravens that are always found on the Tower of London. Anyone familiar with that?
Yeah.
And they say because that was a gruesome spot where so many people were executed throughout all the times of the, that's the legend that's a legend that, no, yeah, not Trafalgar Square, that's something else. I'm talking about the,
Tangentially related. Do you know the term for a collective of ravens?
Murder.
No, sorry, that's crow. That's crow.
Yeah,
It's a murder of crows.
murder.
Sorry.
I bet
Yeah.
it's the same though, don't you?
Yeah.
Crow is a raven.
but
I
in
say it is.
Torah, raven kosher, non-kosher animal. The word in Hebrew is a orev, which sounds very similar to how we say nighttime, erev, same letters, even like ma'ariv, ariv, erev, evening, dark. It also has the same letters as ra, which is evil in it. So there's a verse in Psalms, again, and this is what Tehillim, Psalm says, verse 5a, please, Jackie.
Excuse me.
On
Page 18, skipping to 18.
5e,
5a, let's start with.
it gives the animal its food to the young ravens that call out.
This is a psalm that discusses God's kindness and taking care of the entire world. We say this, it's in our prayers on Shabbat, during the weekdays. And God, you take care of the whole world. You give the animal its food and the young ravens that call out. Why did King David choose to discuss the young ravens that call out? So the commentators say, and again, zoologists amongst us, you'll have to tell me, it says that the parents often leave the young at a very young age. I don't know. Amnon, you can fact check that one. And therefore, Hashem, so to speak, has to work extra hard to provide the young ravens, and that is the meaning of that verse in Psalms where it says he gives the animal its food, the young ravens that call out, because they are abandoned by their parents. I'm going to skip some of these other texts because I want to focus on the main lesson here. So in Torah literature, Arev is seen to be stingy, not generous, dark, black. On the other extreme, a Yonah is a dove. What symbolism do we have of doves?
Peace.
Peace. Where did that come from, by the way?
I was wondering about
Where did the notion that a dove is peace come from?
I bet it postdates this story.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting because even today, right, politically, you're either hawkish or you're dove, right? Those terms have stayed. So in biblical literature, in the Song of Songs, God compares the Jewish people to a Yonah. That's why Yonah, a dove, is a Jewish name. There's also a prophet, of course, whose name was Jonah. Yonah. Is it a kosher animal? A dove? I'm not like you would get much meat out of it, but technically speaking, is a dove kosher? Yeah. Not only is it kosher, but it was actually the only bird that in biblical times was brought as an offering. So you have the raven that's not kosher, the dove is kosher, and it's peace, it's loving. In Song of Songs, text 7a, going forward a little bit. Miriam, please read 7a. This is from Song of Songs. God calls us by the affectionate name.
Behold, you walk homely, my beloved. Behold, you walk homely. Your eyes are like doves.
So God compares us to doves. And the Midrash, the oral tradition on Song of Songs, discusses at length why we're like a dove. So this is an ancient text, this Midrash from the 5th or 6th century, writes as follows. Virgil, would you like to read or not the next text?
No, I can't see super with my glasses.
All right, so we can pass. Pam, can you do the Midrash on that?
Just as the dove is wholesome, Israel is pleasant in their way when they travel to Jerusalem for the 3 holidays. Just as a dove excels, Israel excels. Just as a dove is modest, Israel is modest. Just as a dove is faithful, so its spouse, Israel is faithful to God.
Let me hold it there for a moment. There is something discussed throughout Torah that, again, zoologists, please help me over here. You can fact check this, that a dove will mourn its mate that dies, and it will remain faithful to a mate as opposed to most animals. Have you heard that idea ever before?
I think the dolphins are like that too.
Okay.
If a mate dies, the other one doesn't. There's a
With the exception of the
Man is the exception.
So, in this, and then it continues. It's right here. You can continue.
Each month, the Jewish people renew each month Torah, mitzvah, and good deeds. Just as a dove travels great distances and returns to its nest, so too the Jewish people. Just as a dove brought light to the world, the Jewish people bring light to the world, as it is written, and nations shall go by your light. Now when did a dove bring light to the world? In the days of Noah, as it is written, and the dove returned to him at eventide, and behold, it had plucked an olive leaf in its mouth.
Okay, let's hold it there. So we have 2 animals. We're going to go to section 3 now on page 26. We have 2 animals that represent the exact opposite in Jewish tradition, right? One is going to be love and kindness. One's going to be this stinginess and severity. One's going to be peace. One's going to be more aggressive in nature. Yeah? The raven is the raven a bird of prey?
Yeah.
What is its diet?
Dead animals.
Oh. So let's go back to our question we asked at the beginning and try to see how the symbolism can help us over here. Why did he send the raven, right? If the ideal bird to pick would be the dove to do the mission, and the Bible doesn't even say that the raven was told to do the mission, why would the raven have been the first animal to leave the ark? So let's think for a moment, and I have a
Maybe he was trying to get rid of it.
message coming. So there is that, and I skipped that text. He was trying to get rid of it.
They are extremely territorial. They will be loud and stale.
He's a warrior.
Okay. So let's bring this into psychology, into Noah, into life after the flood. Can we imagine what it must have been like to be a survivor of the flood? The best parallel we sadly have today is
Sure.
the Holocaust, in terms of someone who survived the horror and the destruction that was. We can talk about this on a global scale, and we can discuss this on a personal scale. I'll try not to go back and forth, but I think the message is true for both. Noah sees a world destroyed. He's about to leave. What was the problem with the world?
Evil.
Evil. And as we know that discipline in the world. So Noah is whatever they want. Thought this is a world that needs of an addict. Think of someone, whether it's alcohol or drugs or other things. You cannot allow them to go stick to them. That would be the meaning of the first one going out. Someone that's a world that was destroyed. To build up a relationship. Was it, God forbid, if someone had a really rotten experience, how do they emerge from it? Often, and what do they build around them? A roughness, a what? A fence. They don't want to make themselves vulnerable again. They become skeptical and suspicious of people. They become cynical often. They've been down this road again. Now they need to toughen up a little bit. And sadly, we see that happens both on a national scale as well as on a personal scale. So when the flood is over, you emerge wounded. And what often happens afterwards is you build up that sense of, I don't want to be abused again. I don't want someone else to take advantage of me again. I'm now going to toughen up a little bit. We know people that went through tough experiences and they emerge that way. They're not as open. They're not as flexible. So both in terms of a world that needs more rules, as well as a world that was wounded. And therefore, can you imagine the trauma that must have been like? After seeing the entire world, but we also know the flip side. And the flip side is that while you always have to have your defenses out and make sure this doesn't happen again, you cannot rebuild the world through kivura. The only way to rebuild a world is with love, with chesed, with love, with compassion, with openness, with relationship. You tell someone who's been abused in a relationship, God forbid, what does it take for them afterwards to trust someone again? But it's hard. But ultimately, that's the only way afterwards to have healing. There might be a stage at the beginning. It's very hard for them to immediately jump into something again. There likely will be a stage a little bit at the beginning where they're going to be a little rough around the edges. But then, yes?
Noach got drunk. He's the one that,
Well, this, again, why is the next story in the Torah that Noach gets drunk?
It's a result of the trauma. We would assume that he saw such horribleness.
You want to escaping, yeah. And that would be more not embracing. That would be an act, Steffi, of escaping not embracing, withdrawing. That's actually the key word here. Gevura here means to withdraw, and chesed here would be to engage, to embrace, to love.
Yeah, that's actually part of the story I'm touch troubled by, is the pragmatics of it. Because it takes a long time from there's mud to there's water.
Or there's crops.
Right, I know, there's a lot of time there, and if the story's been squished out because that's not important, that's fine. But Noah actually spent like a year,
Correct.
and then he got drunk. So it's not like he got drunk when he got off the boat. 'Cause,
What was the time frame? I need to look that up.
He
What the
made
time
wine.
frame was? Oh, you're right.
okay, to have wine, you have to have grapes. To have grapes, you have to have, okay, it
Correct.
takes a while.
But it also, think about a survivor after the war. It's not like immediately. I mean, at the beginning, you're raw. And then afterward, the time frame. So at the beginning, you have the raven, and that is the natural response to it. It might even be a healthy response. The world needed a little bit of that discipline and structure, but you don't rebuild the worlds that way. You need the dove. And hence he sends out both. This is the spiritual, according to Kabbalah, according to Hasidus. And I think in the world today, one of the things that bothers me, and I don't want to get political or any of that, but when people don't trust each other, the media makes the world sometimes appear much worse than it really, really is. I genuinely believe most people are good people. I do. I believe that there is more kindness in the world than evil. I believe that there's more good. Dennis, well, yeah. But what happens is, because of all the news that we are always fed, we can develop a raven-like approach to other people, not being trusting, not, sarcastic and cynical and closing off. And yeah, we need some of that. We absolutely. Yeah, and that is that, and it bothers me today where I think we have a lot of that, and the Parsha here is suggesting you need some of that, but what is the one that ultimately repairs the world? The dove. Now I almost see meaning in the fact that the raven kept on circling around, in the sense that it always has to be there in the periphery, right? You have to always have your rules and your discipline. But that's not what rebuilds the world. It's the dove that rebuilds the world.
It doesn't have to be the focus.
It's not the focus. It's somewhere around you, hovering around. What does the verse say when it comes to?
Back and forth.
Oh,
Yeah, and it went.
or something.
Yeah, it was around, but what actually accomplished the mission? It was the dove. It was the chesed. So I was chewing over this idea, and I think it's very relevant today. And the Rebbe was a big believer. We can't give up on the world. And think about the Holocaust survivors and the hell that they went through. It would be so easy for them afterwards to give up on the world. And we can very well understand someone that did. Someone who emerged from the Holocaust and just had a raven-like mentality towards other people and to the world, and a cynicism, and being cynical about everything.
But
And
that is a problem. That is a problem. I'm not talking about cynicism, but towards the religion.
that as well.
Shut themselves off completely from anything related to
To
God, to
Correct.
not even just going to synagogue. I mean, just there's a religious, and then there's the spiritual. They shut it all off.
And I would be the last person, God forbid, to judge anyone that went through the horrors of the Holocaust. I would be the last person to judge. And however, you're right, that was a reality of it. When they emerged, there were people that when they emerged from it, they
That's why you
developed.
have this whole generation that was brought up without any religion,
Mhm.
kind of like knowing they're Jewish, but without anything. And then there you have all this wave of tshuva, Baal tshuva now.
But there was a
Because-
very dark period
Yeah.
in where
But-
people
but
really
these kids-
struggled with this issue, and I
Yeah.
can understand why.
Because these kids didn't go through all of that, so all of a sudden they found themselves in a vacuum,
Correct.
and then they
Correct.
started coming back.
You need a comparison though. If you didn't, can you really appreciate good things like the Torah if you didn't go through the bad times?
Yeah, I mean, and you did have many survivors that were incredible heroes afterwards, and they only had a greater appreciation towards other people and to the world. And we just lost an Elie Wiesel, and this is someone who never lost his raven. I mean, he still struggled with all of his issues throughout life, and yet he dedicated his life to bringing more love to the world. So it's not that he closed the book on that, and I mentioned this on, was it Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur? I can't remember. He wrote this front page article in the New York Times, where he basically said the things that I wrote after the war. He said the things that I wrote, some of you have read some of his books. He says, God, I said some very angry words about you, and there are days that I still sometimes feel that, but I want to move on. Let's make up. And he wrote this incredible article, I think it was 20 or 30 years ago, where he says, I want to move past that stage. Not because I forget, but because that doesn't rebuild worlds. That doesn't rebuild worlds. And I think you had many survivors that lost families and then married afterwards and had children. And they're such an inspiration for me. It's incredible. Or businesses. So many of these people came here with nothing, and it inspires me so much how they didn't give up on the world or life. But at the same time, we know people that didn't want to speak about it, that always had their resistance. Well, we can understand as well. So the Torah in this story, just to conclude, acknowledges both realities, but ultimately the only way to change the world is through love and through the Yonah. That's the way we influence other people. So we'll finish with that, and we need more of that in the world, where we trust other people, and we believe that ultimately the world is a good place. It's God's garden, and most people are good people. We have to deal with the bad, and I'm not suggesting we dismiss the bad, but there's more good than bad, and we need to focus on that good. So we'll hold it over here. Any last thoughts?
Just that in Israel, it not having to do anything with the Holocaust. I remember I met a girl at a conference from kibbutz, from the ones that make the furniture.
Yeah.
And she was about my age at that time. And it was a non-religious kibbutz.
Yeah.
And the people of her generation decided they wanted to light candles. It was such a sha'ariyah. There was so much resistance. So there were people who were ardent Zionists and wonderful people and fantastic, and we loved them and we're glad we had them. But they rejected the religion, and then their next generation
Right.
also found themselves in a vacuum and decided that that's what they wanted.
Yeah. And one last question I didn't answer today, and I know we was, why did he bother doing all this if God was going to tell him when to leave the ark anyways? What do you think the answer to that is?
Because like a parent,
What do you think?
you may know the answer.
I think that he
Like,
saw
are we there
insufficient
yet?
initiative and got a little poke.
Yeah. And that's what we're supposed to do, though. We don't wait for God to do the work for us.
Yeah.
Ultimately, we believe that there's a lot in the world that only God can solve, but we do everything in our power to solve it. We don't wait. I believe there are many things. There's a light bulb that has to go on one day where people see things differently. We call that Mashiach. But we don't wait for that to happen. We send out our ravens and our dove. I want to get out of here. I want to fix the world. And then we hope that God will reciprocate and help us out a little bit in that endeavor. But yeah, Noah didn't just sit back there in the ark and wait for this Mabul to end on its own. He wanted to expedite the process, and that's what we do in the world as well. Yes?
Well, I have a question. There are three who cohabitated in the ark, and understand what that
Yeah.
means. No, wait, understand what that means. They're supposed to do that, but
They were told that while the world is being destroyed, this is not a time to enjoy intimate
Right.
relations.
So the dog, the raven, and what's the champ?
That's
That's
Noah's son, Ham.
Oh, huh. Really?
So yeah, that's a midrash. I skipped some of these texts today because I really wanted to dwell on this last idea with something.
Was stricken with something.
Yeah.
So what was the dog stricken with?
To continue that midrash. I'm not
okay.
sure. I'm not sure.
Because they already
Any
said it's a
questions
dog.
from the online community before we stop today?
Nope.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone that joined in. We will be back every single week, God willing. We hope to have a better connection next week. If you have any questions, you can email me at yc@chabadofcary.org. And we should all take the lesson from today that in our lives, no matter what we go through, even if we have to build up some level of resistance around us, which is understandable, we have to not give up on the world, not to give up on mankind, and ultimately it is the dove that heals worlds.
On a totally different
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. Our weekly lineup of call-in programs includes Computers 2K Now with Amnon Nissan, My Life, My Will with Gisela DiCarlo, The Tanya Love Show, Health Then with Debbie Bruck, Breaking Free with Marilyn Shannon, Triangle Be Well with Howard Jacobson, Lunch and Learn with Rabbi Yisrael Cutler, Lessons of Vietnam with NCVVI members, Current Affairs with Amnon Nissan. And if you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it in the archives section on nissancommunications.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us on Twitter, and like us on Facebook. Sponsored by Atomos.com, makers of quality video recorders and converters, CarolinaApparel.com, and DeltaForce.net.